Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
You lead by example. You never ever tell somebody to do something that you're not willing to do. Because if you do that, then there is always the chance that he will know more than you do about the job.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Anything But Bollywood, where we talk to creators, filmmakers, and curators of the moving images. But it's with one condition, that they be working in spheres that are anything but Bollywood. So having said that, Bollywood is this ginormous monster that devours everything that's in its path, and we're podcasting out of Mumbai, so we will invariably bump into people who have a toe or a finger or a foot in Bollywood. So to deal with this contentious issue, we're introducing you to our Anything But Bollywood scoring, also known as ABS. So an Anand Patwardhan gets a 10-pack and Salman Khan gets a 0-pack. So our guest this week scores a 6-pack AB rating, perfect 6 packs. He is an ad filmmaker, a scuba diver, a cigar connoisseur, a restaurateur, and a guru to legions of flunkies. I was one of them. And he's now the founder and dean of a school on branding and entrepreneurship. He is Prahlad Kakkar, PK as he's known to all. He's started his company Genesis in 1977, and since then he's created very memorable, iconic campaigns for brands like Pepsi, the Yehi Hair Right Choice Baby, Gold Spot the Zing Thing, Maggi 2 Minutes, Britannia Ting Ting Ting, Limca Zor Ka Jhatka, and Maggi sauces It's Different. So I want to know, how did you start then from this journey into filmmaking and advertising? How did that transition happen?
I was very clear about one thing, that I didn't want to work. Now, I didn't realize how beautiful a truth that is. Is when you're passionate about something that you want to do, it doesn't feel like work. Now, I couldn't. This is all in hindsight.
Right.
When you say that, okay, I was looking for a passion. I was looking for something that didn't feel like work. I was looking for something that I could spend 18 hours a day and not feel tired. And constantly be challenged. And it never articulated itself like that. All I knew was that I didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job. And I wanted to drop out of college because I thought college was a waste of time. And immediately after my school, I said, why am I doing this college jazz? Why can't I just go to tea? Because they were accepting people in tea at that time without being a graduate. And there were lots of beautiful gardens in Assam and Darjeeling, and places were lovely. And if you look at photographs of tea gardens even today, it's a dream job.
Right.
Actually, if you're that way inclined. But fate played another hand, and I was stuck in a city, and I had to look for a job before, and I realized that I wasn't going to do particularly well in my academics. So therefore, I needed to land the job before my results came out, purely on personality, So I walked into a couple of walk-in interviews, and one of them was for Citibank.
Okay.
And they liked, for some reason, I don't know why at that time, there was a chap called Mike Winters, who was the recruiting officer. And he was a bit quirky himself. He was slightly irreverent. And he liked my irreverence. He liked the fact that I could laugh at myself. And that I didn't take it too seriously. And that it wasn't the end of the world if I didn't get the job. And that I was just doing a tukka and trying it, saying, "Acha, mil jaye to, sab khush honge." And he said, "You're fine." And he took me through the whole interview section. And he said, "Okay, now if you get a decent second class," it all depends on that. If you get a decent second class in your BA in economics. Now, I told him that I was majoring in economics. What I didn't tell him was that I was actually majoring in military strategy. Now, economics was one of my subjects, but I wasn't particularly good at it. I was very good at military strategy. I was very interested. I was really hooked. I loved the fact of how wars were fought. And they were fought not just on pure courage and adrenaline. They were fought on tactics. They were fought on strategy. They were fought on logistics. They were fought on vision. And they were fought on guts and glory.
So you really brought that then to the advertising, right? I mean, it was really your whole, what I saw you do at Genesis, which I really admire, was you have the power of persuasion, and that's really what you did. And so was there like, when you started out, was there a way you strategized about how you were going to do this, or is that something you stumbled through?
No, I think it just came to me naturally. Because when I studied the art of war, as you call it, I mean, everybody considers the art of war only in one book, which was written by Sansui. But I think all battles, all histories of all wars, is the art of war and the art of winning and losing. So the fact was that what I managed to get was that you lead by example. You never ever tell somebody to do something that you're not willing to do. Because if you do that, then there is always the chance that he will know more than you do about the job. You must always know more than your mentee. If you're going to be a mentor, you have to always know more than your mentee.
So, on the subject of mentors, you started out working with Shyam Benegal. And from there, he, of course, made a very different kind of cinema than what you went on to do, which was advertising. So, how did that transition then come about?
See, you must remember Shyam's history. Shyam started off as an advertising filmmaker.
Right.
You see, Shyam was a great believer in Satyajit Ray. And if you look at Satyajit Ray's history, he was an advertising professional. He was an advertising professional who was hugely articulate, very passionate about films, did a lot of ad films in his own life, and then went on to making features, for whatever it was worth. Okay. Shyam actually idolized, if he idolized anybody, it was Satyajit Ray. And his choreograph was more or less similar because he was also from advertising.
Right.
He was a damn good advertising professional. And he was extremely popular with all his clients. Because
today, actually, when you look at his history, that's kind of almost erased out by what he did after that.
Because he did better things and more relevant things. You see, the business of advertising, how much ever we enjoy it and how much however good you are at it, there is no history of it.
Right.
You don't get a credit.
Right.
You never put your name on your work. What happened during my generation was that there were among us about 5 to 10 really good advertising filmmakers who put their signature on their work by the quality of the work and by putting themselves into it. So you could actually do a character analysis by looking at 10 of my films.
Right.
And say, what kind of person is this?
Right.
Who's made these films?
Right.
Is he irreverent? Is he funny? Is he, what is he like? Is he sensual? Does he like women? Does he not like women? And so forth and so on. So there were 10 of us, which actually formed the core group of professional advertising filmmakers for the first time in the history of this country, who put everything that they had into their work, because their work was their life. And it wasn't work. It was passion. Okay, so you could actually psychoanalyze them by their work. So they didn't have to put their names on for the credits. You could recognize the work of any of these 10 by the quality of the work.
So actually, your voice, what I feel is your authentic voice that came out in the commercials, is your irreverence and your humor.
Yes.
And it's a very physical, cartoonish kind of humor, which really emerged very clearly for me in the Maggi campaign with Javed Jaffrey.
Yes.
It's different. So I wanted to know, was that something that you struggled with finding, or was it natural for you to come to that?
Well, Javed and me are lost brothers in the Mela, except that he's circumcised and I'm not.
So can you maybe take us through one of the campaigns that you did, maybe the It's Different campaign, and what was that working relationship like with him?
You see, there was a chap called Dennis Joseph who was working with JWT, and he thought he had an idea, but he couldn't take it beyond that. And he looked at a film called Kramer versus Kramer. And he took the title from there, and he said, let's do a film with Nasiruddin Shah and Satish Shah. And call it Shah versus Shah. And the basic brief was, which was very sound, which we carried through, was that one Shah loves Maggi, and the other Shah can't understand why. This guy is so hooked on Maggi. So the whole thing wasn't action-packed. It was dialogue-packed. And it was dialogue between two great friends. One was a fat, greedy guy, which is Satish Shah, who loved the sauce. And there was Nasiruddin Shah, who couldn't understand why he was so hooked on the sauce. And he kept asking why. And this guy tried to always explain to him why he was so hooked on the sauce. And finally came to the conclusion that it's different. So he said it's sweet. So he was asked questions like, is it sweet? Is it sour? Is it tikka? Is it this? Is that? He said, no, it's everything. It's different. Okay. Now, working backwards from that, we had to now develop a campaign where difference became the end punchline. And not the beginning, because then what do you do the commercial afterwards?
Right.
So we decided, since Javed is an encyclopedia of the Hindi movie industry and the lines that have been immortalized by the Hindi movie, we decided to go that route because it started with the villain, where he Ajit the villain, who said, Mona, don't be silly, or whatever, Mona.
And you made it into Lily,
don't be silly, Okay, so these were the lines which he had immortalized. So we borrowed those and made them into situations which were gangster situations about doing up with the sauce in a society. But then we had to go beyond that because we had to go into everyday life. We had to go into tennis, we had to go into swimming, we had to go into all sorts of things. Now, what happened was the brief that the client gave us was that there was only money for one commercial because it was a very sub-brand. It wasn't even the sauces brand. It was hot and sweet tomato chili ketchup, which is a variant, and it was a very small variant of the larger ketchup family because that was their flagship. And we said, how do we get everything into one? So we had a whole lot of lines, sauce ke 100 din. Or 100 din sauce ke, 100 din sauce ke from.
Oh, okay.
And so forth and on. And those lines we then developed into situations. And what Javed came up with was, what was brilliant was, let's start every commercial with one day at. With the clapboard in the beginning was, one day
with Lily,
or one day with Lily, or one day in the den, or one day with this, or one day just like that. And one day at night. We even had one called One Day at Night. So it started with that, which kicked off the intrigue as to how the story would unfold. And then this argument developed between these two guys in the middle of a situation. Whatever the situation is. So whether they're watching a tennis match, which is going tuck, 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 where their heads are going from one side to the other side, like almost like a ping pong ball. And then there's this dialogue going on. He says, so what's different? So he says, is it this, is it that? And protagonist was supposed to be eating something with the sauce and pouring it out. So he says, it's तो इसमें है क्या? मीठा है, तीखा है, क्या है? And luckily for us, that particular variant was a tikha variant. So it wasn't like an ordinary tomato ketchup, which only kids like because it's sweet. This had a zing to it, so there was a tikhaness to it. And we could then take liberties with that. And we had 14 lines and we shot 7 commercials over one day just to test them.
Oh, wow.
So not commercials, but like scratches. And because we couldn't afford locations and sets, we got Guruji, who was our set designer at that time, to just paint the backdrops very roughly. So that we had a backdrop and these two guys sitting there. So one day at the park. So they were sitting on a park bench with some trees in the background which were painted on. And that became the style of the commercials, because what actually happened was that when we were presenting the commercials to the client, saying that, listen, we can't do one, we have to do 6 because they don't make sense. If it's just one, because it's incomplete. And they were arguing, saying, we can't afford 6, so just forget it. So junk it. And anyway, where's my sauce mount? Where's my this? Where's my that? The typical MNC thing. It says, there's no appetite appeal. There's no nothing. You're just cracking jokes at our expense or whatever the hell you're doing. And you're just being clever. So he said, but that's what it's all about. If you're doing a Kramer versus Kramer, Shah versus Shah, this is what it is. So the campaign was going to be shot down, and Dennis had this habit of, whenever he got negative response to his ideas, he was a tall fellow. He was about 6'1" and lanky, and he used to start sliding lower and lower in his chair and going under the table. So by the time the meeting had almost ended, all I could see was Dennis's eyes. just above the table level. It slid all the way under the table, and by his body language, you could know that it's not going through the campaign. And whatever efforts were, like whatever we thought of it, was not happening. The managing director of that company, Nestle at that time, was a mad Baba called Adeshar, who everybody was shit scared of because he was highly unpredictable. Okay, but he wasn't. There was a method in his madness too, and he made a lot of sense in whatever he did. So at that time, the executive toilet in his room was being repaired. So he had to go to the general toilet, and to do that, he had to cross the conference room where this enormous argument was taking place, where the agency and Janice and all of us were defending the campaign, and the client team, the marketing team, was saying this is rubbish.
Right. Okay.
And he walked past and he peeped in and he said, "You guys seem to be having a lot of fun." And we all shat. We said, "Oh, bloody hell, this is the old man, and he's now going to bajaw us." And we said, "No, sir." We're just trying out some ideas. He says, "Wait for me. I'm just taking a leak. I'll be back. Don't move." And he went off to the toilet, and 10 minutes later he came back. And he said, "Right, where were we?" So we did the whole presentation all over again to him with heart and mouth, thinking he was going to sack us for being frivolous with his brand. He thought for a moment and he said, "How many commercials are there?" So I said, "Just 7. He said, "Take the last one out," because the last one actually gave away the game. Because Javed actually tastes the sauce. I mean, the Nasir character would actually taste the sauce and say, "Yes, wow, it's different." So he said, "Leave the last one out. I want to leave this campaign open-ended. We're going to run it for years." Okay, and he said, and he told the brand manager, he said, "How much money do we have?" So she said, "About 1 crore. He said, "That's nothing." He said, "How much money do we have for ketchup?" She said, "About 10 crores. So she said, "Take all the money out of the main flagship brand and put it on this." She said, "But so what do we do with the flagship brand?" She says, "Nobody's going to remember anything. They're only going to remember Maggi sauces, and that is ketchup. Trust me." And everybody disagreed with him completely, except us, who were leaping with joy because he wanted all 6 commercials.
Right.
Which is the heart of what the campaign was. And anyway, reluctantly, so he said, "Okay, so these are complete, so we put them on air?" I said, "No, sir, they're not complete, they're scratches. They've been done with characters from my office." So Javed, who had written the commercials with me, was one of the characters. He was playing the Nasir character. And there was a fat boy in my office who was playing the Satish Shah character. So he said, "So what's wrong with these two?" So I said, "Nothing, sir, except that we wanted Shah versus Shah, which is Satish Shah and Nasiruddin Shah." He said, "It doesn't matter." He said, I don't care who you let's run them as that, they look okay to me." I said, "Sir, they've been done on VHS, they're very, rough, and all the backgrounds are painted. None of them are real backgrounds." So he says, "Really?" He said, "I thought that was the part of the design of the film." So we said, "No, sir, that was because we didn't have money." So he said, "Well, let's make it the design of the film. I want the same backgrounds." And then he said, "I love the language." So he says, "What do you call it?" Because it was a mixture of Hindi and English.
Right.
So for the first time in the history of Indian advertising, we coined a word called Hinglish.
Oh, really?
And after that, Hinglish became the place to go. Because it actually was street language.
Yeah.
What is English? At the end of it, English is street language. What you speak in the street. You don't speak pure English. You don't speak pure Hindi. You don't because they were sharp, they were clean, they were funny. And so when we went back to Nasir and to Satish and asked them to come and do these commercials for us, they quoted some astronomical sum, and the client almost passed out. "We don't have money for production, what are you talking about?" So we said, "So what do you do?" So they said, "Hadishar approved Javed."
All right, we're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, we're going to look ahead at some of Prahlad's other work, where he's worked with bigger stars, the Bollywood stars. So we'll be right back.
Long, long ago, not in Bethlehem, but in a place nearby, there was a wonderful birth of a huge show, which I like to call Cyrus Says. A show that encapsulates everything in human history, From the first Homo sapien to the last Homo sapien, who's traversed the entire world and then come back to India. This is a show which tells you everything about everything. If you want to know, avoid Google, come to us. It's called Cyrus Says. Get new episodes every Monday on the IVM podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts on. You get one banana vada free with every podcast. Right. I'll just check that.
Right, we're back. We're talking to Prahlad Kakkar, who has to finish his Maggi story.
So what happened eventually was the client couldn't afford Nasir and Satish. So we went back to Javed and he said, will you do it? He says, but, I've written these. So I said, there's nobody better who can do it because you've written them. So he says, okay, who do we take? So we needed some form of a draw as a big star. Javed wasn't a big star at that time, so we needed a little bit of traction. So we found the carrot-eating detective. So we found the carrot-eating actor, and we found during research that he had a lot of traction. People thought he was terrific. And he is. He's one of the greatest actor. Yeah. And so we said, okay, we'll put Karamchand as the guy who loves the sauce. And Javed as the guy who can't stand it or can't understand why. And we tried it out, and it worked so well because Pankaj brought in an element which we had never thought of, which was deadpan underplaying. And Javed was over the top.
Over the top, right.
So the contrast between the two is different. It worked so well for the brand. To a very large extent, I give the entire credit not only to Javed, but mostly to Adeshar for having bought the campaign. Because it was the first of its kind. It's many firsts.
It was quite a landmark campaign. Even today people remember it. I saw Javed Jaffrey at the thing, and that was one of the things I remembered about him.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the fact was that it takes a great client to recognize a great idea. Because everybody wants mediocrity in advertising. Believe me, everybody thinks that advertising is this great creative thing. You don't have any idea the kind of fight you have to get into if it's anything out of the ordinary. Because there's so many naysayers. Because they're scared of the risk.
Right, and I think that kind of translates to anything, right? Anything that you're trying to create that's new, that you will always have that kind of opposition.
Which is where I learned how to sell. So finally I realized that the only thing that really sells is commitment.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about your very successful campaigns for Pepsi. There was a client that you've had and nurtured over many years through many campaigns. So what were the challenges that you faced? Because at that time, especially if you go back and think, every time a Pepsi or a Coke commercial came out, there was such a huge buzz around it, which is not there anymore. So what was that like? Was there any pressure? What were the challenges that you...
There was enormous pressure, but the pressure was... See, I was a natural for Pepsi because I was the product. I was frothy, I was irreverent, I was not so young, but I behaved young. I behaved irresponsibly to a certain extent. And the agency and me, we got along very well because they were not telling me to go and go the full jump. They were trying to curb me. They were saying, no, pull it back a bit. You're really over the top. You're really going hell-bent for leather. But this is the brief. And let's take this to its logical conclusion. And my logical conclusion and everybody else's logical conclusion was Asman Zameen ka fark. So we found a meter somewhere in between. But with great support. And I'd say one thing for my client, which is basically Vibha Rishi, that after the initial depredation of should we let these guys run amok with the brand because it means it's so important to brand, that they realized that there was a method in the madness. She realized that there was a method in the madness. And she gave us a very long rope to hang ourselves with. And it's very rare. In my lifetime, I found, say, 3 clients who given us that kind of rope. There was Dr. Kurian when I was working with Shyam Benegal, who gave us that rope with Amul. There was, Sunil Lalak with Britannia, who we worked with a lot, who gave us that rope to hang ourselves. And there was Vibha Rishi from Pepsi, who gave us that rope. And you can see the quality of advertising that we produced in those days compared to the shit that they're producing now.
Yeah, they were very successful, very memorable Pepsi campaigns.
No, because they had so much traction, because it just fired everybody's imagination. Part of it was because the funniness of the commercials was natural. It wasn't forced. And thing like Putle, when that the guard outside
at the gate
turned and said, "Players only, Putle,"
right.
you know,
Yeah.
and he did it as in an English style.
Right.
Putle is a very Bombay word.
Right.
Putle, you know. And we made it into an anglicized thing. It caught on. It got so much traction. You have no idea. You know, everybody's saying Putle. Then at the end of the commercial, Sachin came up with an idea which we then incorporated into the film. Because the original script as we written is that he's going out to bat and he's really shit scared. And Sachin comes in and says, "Hi, Sachin." He says, "Oh, Sachin, sorry, you know, I mean, I just wanted the Pepsi kind of thing." So he says, "Okay, I'll take it from there," and takes the bat and goes out to bat. But Sachin says, "Why should I go out and bat?
Right.
Let me take the Pepsi."
That was a great moment. So that was totally on set. That
was on set. And Sachin said, "Let's do this." So we all got into a confab and said, "Let's do it." And the fact was that we knew that Vibha would like it. We didn't even have to check with her. Because we're changing the punchline of a commercial. That's a very big deal.
Yeah.
You know, so we said, "Should we check with her?" I said, "Yeah, we'll call her up later, but let's shoot it now." And we had so much faith in the fact that she was on the right side. That she would actually appreciate it, because we all loved the idea that he doesn't take the bat and go out to bat. He takes the Pepsi and goes back to the team and leaves what you call Shahrukh to go out and back. And it was a great moment.
It was a great moment,
you know? And that's what makes commercials living and alive, is that you have to be flexible. You have to see sometimes you get a better idea on the set. And then you don't get your chuddies in a tangle and wonder what the client is going to say.
Right.
You have to just trust your instincts and just go for it. And that's one thing I've always done. And which is why I got a reputation with clients and with agencies saying, "Ye tu change kar dega script."
Right. And you never adhered to any of their storyboards or any...
No, I did. You know, the fact was that actually, in fact, I adhered to the brief implicitly. I just sometimes tweak the execution to make the brief better.
Better, right.
So the branding, the brand value of the brand, the essence of the brand in the communication always remained primary, never changed. But the delivery of the brand value, I would take a call on and say, "This is a better way to deliver it." And not too many people, even in my time, were willing to take that risk. Today, though, nobody does, which is why the quality of commercials is so bad.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important, because also you're incorporating other ideas which are better possibly than your own.
No, it's not ideas. You know, it's just like, for instance, in switching sides. He says, "Sachin going out to bat," Sachin takes the Pepsi and goes back. Now, it's not changing the idea. It's still the same idea.
Right.
It's just that you're changing the punchline. Which is quite a big deal, actually.
Yeah.
But the fact is that everybody on the set knows it's working better. Now, when you know it's working better, then why would you look for second best?
I wanted to talk about your collaborations. You worked a lot with a lot of Bollywood actors, from Amitabh Bachchan to Shah Rukh Khan, Amir Khan, of course, Aishwarya Rai in her first commercial. So what was that working relationship like with these actors?
Usually very good, even with the difficult ones. And some of the most difficult ones were people like Govinda, who never came on time.
Right.
He used to come 24 hours late.
Notorious.
No, but I'll tell you one thing about Govinda. When he came on the set and he liked what you were doing, he gave you 100%. So he managed to complete a commercial in half a day, what would take 3 days. Because he was like on the ball. You know, he would come 24 hours late, he'd finish it in half a day, and you'd save a day at the end of it. You know, so those of you who were pulling your hair out in frustration,
right.
The fact was that at the end of it, he delivered, and he delivered brilliantly. And he was a very fine actor. His sense of timing was impeccable. And I had a great working relationship with him because he used to pay me this backhanded compliment. And I used to wonder whether it was a compliment or not, you know, because he'd say, you know, aap mere advertising ke David Zaban hai.
That is a compliment. That is a huge compliment. So, was there any of them? What were the challenges in working with them? Were there egos involved? How did you manage?
No, it was not egos. It was the fact that we were overawed. When with Mr. Bachchan, we used to shit bricks, frankly. One of the reasons was that in the industry, there's an incorrigible late coming from everybody, including the director who thinks he can doodle in any time he wants. And everybody comes late down the line, so that you never start at 9 o'clock when you're supposed to. You start at 10. So everybody doodles in at various times, and the actor comes in last. So you have your time to set it up. Mr. Bachchan used to come 10 minutes before time and throw a complete monkey wrench in the works. I couldn't sleep the night before because I knew that at least I had to be there on time. And because I walk in and it's a little egg on your face when he's sitting there with a newspaper in the middle of your set with one light on because he's asked a spot boy or light boy to actually light up his newspaper. And he's sitting there reading the newspaper, and he's already there.
So then how do you direct someone like that when you are so overawed? I mean,
it's tricky.
Yeah, so how do you negotiate that?
You have to co-opt them into the idea. And say, so this is what we're trying to do. How would you do it? And if somebody like Mr. Bachchan would give you 4 options straight away, tuck, tuck, tuck.
Right.
This is the third option.
All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about Prahlad's biggest learning from all these years in advertising.
Are you confused about your future education options?
Not sure about whether you should be doing an MBA?
Or if design school is the right fit for you?
Are you worried about how you would finance your education?
Find answers to this and a lot more education-related topics on this podcast.
Hi, my name is Akhil Daswani. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OnCourse.
Hi, my name is Alisha Mashruwala. I'm the CEO and co-founder of OnCourse.
And we both are your co-hosts for the OnCourse podcast. Tune in every Monday on the IVM podcast app or any other podcast app you may like.
Okay, we're back on Anything But Bollywood. We're talking to Prahlad Kakkar, and he's going to tell us what his biggest learning has been in all these years of doing advertising.
Well, if somebody said that, what would you change on the way you went about it? And a lot of it was andhadhuni, a lot of it was flukes, a lot of it was not meant to be the way it was.
We joined you in not knowing what the hell we were doing.
Yes, exactly. So, but we went for it because of our commitment and the conviction that something good would come out of it if we believed in it enough. And I think that still stands good. Only thing is, it's become much more difficult. Because at my time, I think the responsibility of creative advertising was shared equally between management and creative people. More so with creative people. So creative people had a bigger hand in saying, okay, what do we present to the client? Today, it's reversed. Creative people have been relegated to second position, and the suits are running it, and all the suits are MBAs. And when they teach you something in one thing they teach you in the big schools, which is common to all big schools, be it Harvard, be it IIT, or be it IIM or whatever, and that is, if you have a gut reaction, take a purgative. Advertising works on gut reactions and instinct and passion and illogic, at the end of it. Now, because the suits are tending to run the business today, the business has become more or less uniform. So if you look at most advertising today and you take away the brand name and the headline, and you put anybody's brand name or headline on the pictures and on the creative ideas, they could be anybody's advertising. And it need not even be category specific.
Right.
You can actually jump categories, So if you take 10 shooting ads and take away the name of the shooting, other than Raymond's, none of them stand out.
That's true.
At my time, I remember we were doing a lot of work for Bombay Dyeing. And Bombay Dyeing was a very big brand at that time because it was very creative. And Mrs. Wadia was the person who was actually running the advertising for Bombay Dyeing. And whatever having said, she was a great risk taker. She was truly a great risk taker because some of the ideas that she approved for us were like completely off the wall.
Yeah, the Bombay Dyeing commercial with Dalip Tahil, that
Yes.
was like totally unexpected. I mean, as a brand, I didn't think that would
But it had so much traction. The people loved it because the clothes were displayed. Dilip was playing the buffoon, the slightly lecherous buffoon, and he was chasing skirts and saris and whatever else, and salwar kameezes, and there were a whole lot of very beautiful women who were displaying these clothes.
Right.
And he was right through the middle telling your story. So you remembered Dilip and you remembered the brand. And it didn't matter whose faces you portrayed as far as the brand value is concerned. You remembered the brand.
Right.
And I remember people going into the shops and saying, I want that particular print on that sari in that sequence of the film.
Wow.
It was that specific.
I wanted to ask you, you made so many films. Some of them, as you self-admittedly said, were very bad films. So do you think that was part of the process of doing it, that they were going to be bad films?
No, I found a sort of a method in that madness also. I found that whenever we compromised our own belief in the films and listened to somebody else because of monetary reasons, or because if you argue too much, they'd turn around and give the job to somebody else, and you wanted the job because you wanted the money. I always found that we were wrong. Always, every single time when we did it for money and not for passion and not for commitment, we made a bad film. And it was invariable. I don't know how that was so consistent. If you look right through my career, all the turkeys were the ones that we turned around and said, let's do it for the money. And the hell with the script.
Yeah, but I guess in such a long career, it would not have been possible to also necessarily...
No, you learn early that, you follow your instinct, you follow your nose. Once you get the hang of the job, then you know what people will like and what people will not like. It doesn't matter what the client likes or not. Because the client is very happy with 2 and 2 is equal to 4. People are not. People would like 16, 18, 20 out of it. Because it's the value that you add to what you do. But there's a risk involved. And the risk involved is that do they listen to their education and background, which is an MBA? Or do they listen to me, who's saying, this is going to work. I'm telling you it's going to work. And with nothing to support it, except my instinct.
So I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about reinvention, because you're very good at that. And Shyam Benegal had said, which we all know about you, is that your mind goes in many directions at the same time and that you succeed in whichever direction it goes. So you've always ventured beyond advertising into entrepreneurship. You're a foodie, you've run restaurants, you've had a cigar manufacturing business, you started a diving school like you mentioned. So do those things cross over into the films? What is that relationship like?
Everything is interrelated. Because I realized that you can't isolate one passion from another passion. If you fail in one of your businesses, then it affects all your other businesses as well. So since our businesses aren't businesses and they're not insulated from each other, they basically follow the same principle of passion and illogic and making it work despite everybody saying it's not working or it's not going to work. And when you prove that every time, people are also waiting for you to fail. So they can turn around and say, yaar, ye bhi nahi kar sakte, to film kaise banayega? So our core business was always filmmaking. Everything spun off from filmmaking. Everything spun off from filmmaking to the extent that the filmmaking part of it actually funded most of my other so-called hobbies come businesses. Okay? And if we didn't have the filmmaking, we would have never had the option to do the other things that we did, because we would have never had that kind of money to be able to put into those, at least to initiate them for whatever it was worth.
Now you've reinvented yourself as a teacher, as a guru. You've started a school on branding and entrepreneurship.
I was always a teacher.
Yeah,
and that was what I was best at. So whether it was Genesis, where we made film and created lots of young filmmakers, or whether it was scuba diving, where we introduced young people to the ocean and they became ocean freaks and environmentalists and marine biologists and all kinds of things. There were lots of spin-offs, And so in a small office like ours, which was 400 square feet, basically, can you imagine we had 3 verticals going for us?
Yeah, I know. It was crazy. We did all kinds of things.
We ran restaurants. We made films. We ran a scuba diving operation. We had a state-of-the-art kitchen in the office, so everybody cooked, and so on. So you could become a chef. You could become a scuba diving instructor. You could become an adventure freak. You could become a filmmaker. You could become a crack production manager. You could become a jewelry designer, because the aesthetics that we learned in the process of making our films, because it was such an important part of the process, was the aesthetics. That a lot of our people became designers from that aesthetics. So like Farah Khan is now a top jewelry designer, and she was one of my assistants. And I find people all over the world who are my ex-assistants who come up to me and say, we worked with you. So I said, no, correction, you survived me. So the fact is, when we made the curriculum for the college, we realized two things. One was that of the 300 alumni that were hanging out there, more or less, in the last 20 years that we've created, none of them work for anybody else. So whatever profession they're in, they don't work for somebody else, they work for themselves. So which means that they were entrepreneurs. Okay? They never worked as a job. They never did a job. They owned the job. So even if they worked as a freelancer for somebody else on a particular project, they didn't listen to anybody. They brought in so much value that nobody actually told them what to do. They did it. And they owned their jobs. So we realized that the difference between a job person and an entrepreneur is whether you do a job or not is irrelevant. Is do you own the job? Or do you do a job? Because when you do a job, it's a 9-to-5 job. And you watch the clock. When you own the job, it's 24/7. Okay? That's the attitude. And so we started this entrepreneur school thinking that let's borrow from what we made our kids do. What did the ex-Genesis people actually do? So we sat down and we discussed it, and we figured out that what we made them do was not written in any book. The book was thrown out of the window. We wrote our own book. And the book revolved around Murphy.
Of course. There are some Prahlad Kakkar truisms. Murphy's Law is one of them.
Yes. And that if you cannot learn to anticipate Murphy, you're not doing a job. Ticking boxes is not what we taught our kids.
I think we learned life lessons. I mean, they are life lessons. Actually, after I left Genesis for a while, I was like, what the hell did I do? And then slowly as the years went by, there are so many lessons that even now I'm still learning from what we did. You talk about, in your curriculum, you talk about going beyond fear, which is, and you talk about confronting your fears and the fear of failure. So why don't we talk about failure enough?
That's exactly what we do in our course. We take the boogie out of failure, and we turn around and say in our curriculum that if you haven't failed enough, you'll never succeed. Because you only learn through failures, you never learn through success. Success makes you arrogant, and you stop learning. Failure actually makes you humble and opens you up to learn. So we never teach case histories which are success stories, because they're all lies. They've been written in hindsight by somebody who wanted to be in the case history. All failures nobody wants to do with, have anything to do with. So they're the truth. And we make them study failures because we challenge them then. What would you do differently in the same circumstances? Because the difference between success and failure sometimes is a very thin line. It's a matter of taking the right decision at the right time. So decision making is the real heart of our curriculum. Embrace the decision. Never sit on your ass. Never procrastinate. Take the call. Okay? For that you have to be fearless. Not fearless enough to be foolish, but fearless enough to having faced your fears and said, okay, let's go for it. Don't get paralyzed by your fear of failure, especially. If you get paralyzed by your fear of failure, you'll never achieve anything in life. So beyond fear is a very deep meaning of what we put our kids through, what we did in Genesis. We threw you into the deep end.
Yeah, we did all kinds of things.
We made you do all kinds of things, which we make our kids in our base school do all kinds of things. We make them jump out of planes. We make them dive with sharks. We make them live in a snake farm. We make them go to the mountains. I mean, everything that you are phobic about.
So I wanted to wind up now, and I think it's been a very interesting conversation. So I wanted to ask you, how would you like to be remembered? What is your legacy?
Advertising has a shelf life of 6 months. If you look at any commercial, however good it might be, it's for the moment because it was designed to be for the moment. And advertising is what is advertising? It's about dreams of tomorrow. So when your dreams of tomorrow become dreams of yesterday, they're irrelevant. Because dreams of tomorrow is what society lives on, it's hope. That's what advertising creates for society, is that tomorrow is going to be a better day.
Right.
Okay, so that's the hope that advertising is designed for. So advertising has a shelf life of 6 months because every 6 months your dreams change, your hopes change. So all the work that we have done, the body of work we've done, how brilliant or outstanding or original it might have been at its time, it's irrelevant. Okay, it's not really going to show up what you went through in life to do. So your body of work does not reflect your growth. What my growth reflects is what I've put into the people that I have trained. And they are my products, not my films.
It's a lovely note to close on. So we wind up our show by asking for a film recommendation. So you have a minute to think about yours. I'm going to talk about mine. My film recommendation is The Salesman, Asghar Farhadi's film. It's supposed to release this week. I hope this episode releases by then. But in case it doesn't, do check it out. It's a really good film because he's very good with this kind of story. His characters are very grey. And so you see this interesting shift that happens, that the victim in his films becomes the perpetrator. And so that's a very fascinating story, and he's very good with this kind of story. It's an Iranian film. Don't be afraid of reading subtitles.
That's what happens when you come out of a subtitle film. Is you start looking at everybody's stomach, waiting for the subtitles.
Okay. So do you have a movie record
My
for
all-time
us?
favorite film has always been Blade Runner. And Blade Runner for me epitomizes the greatest element of filmmaking, which is detail, which is clarity, which is vision, it's all about dreams. And it's all about the future. It's not about the past so much. And when Ridley Scott made Blade Runner, he had already made one film. Not so well, but it was a classic by itself. It was called Duelists. And if you look at it historically, he made it on a very low budget. He was a night filmmaker, Ridley Scott. And he made the first film, Duelists. It was about these two officers in the French army who constantly feuded with each other. They were in the same army. And right through their career, they fought each other. And that's why they called the Duelists, because at that time dueling was in. And it was such a stunningly visual film, but slow. And therefore, he was getting the hang of storytelling in that way. But do you know that Duelists lost the Oscar to Barry Lyndon?
Oh, really?
By one vote.
Oh.
Because Barry Lyndon, they spent so much money, Kubrick's film, in creating lenses which could shoot in candlelight. You know, the Oscar for cinematography.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And Duelists lost the cinematography vote on a low budget, but with sheer dedication and detailing by one vote to Barry Lyndon. And today all the lenses that you use in your cameras, all because of Barry Lyndon. Because they were commissioned to be made, which nobody thought was possible, you know.
Okay, thank you so much, Prahlad. This has been a very good, exciting conversation. I hope everyone gets something out of it. I did, even though I worked for you for so long.
No, but for you it was nostalgia. It is like going back.
It is like going back, yeah. But these are all lessons that bear repeating, I think, because life swings you along, and I think you need to hear them again. I think that's a good note to end on. Thank you everyone for listening. This has been an episode of Anything But Bollywood. Thank you for listening. We'll be back again next week with a new guest.
Excuse me भैया, excuse me.
बोलिए मैडम.
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वैक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, ड्रिंक्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर जकरबर्ग है और द फैन गराज है. आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम. आप जाओ IVMpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप. सब आपकी उंगलियों पे.